and welcome back to the channel. I'm the Spell Singer, and this is my ongoing review of the Fighting Fantasy Gamebook series. Before I get stuck into this one, I just want to say a quick thank you to 5 random recent subscribers that have joined us, just to show a bit of appreciation. So big thanks to Girdler Synthetic, Minerva, that's like a Roman goddess or something, I don't know. Ffinity, Yo, and Alex Steve, thank you and welcome. Really appreciate it. Right, this series this ongoing series review is going to basically bring you a quick look at the title and book number, and I'll read the blurb. We'll chat a little bit about the plot for this book and take a look at those game mechanics and an adventure sheet. And I'll run the artwork through this video as usual, and then I'll talk a little bit about my likes and dislikes, any fun facts, any errors that might have cropped up in this book, and I shall end as always with a summary and score out of 10. Right, so this book, this is book 20. Oh my god, book 20 already. This was written by Jamie Thompson and Mark Smith, so they're back from their little stint away with the Way of the Tiger series, and they've given us another fighting fantasy book. This was published in 1986, and the cover artist was Peter Andrew Jones, and I think he did the same cover for these two authors when he did Talisman of Death, which we reviewed way back. But the internal artwork was Alan Langford, and he will go on to do quite a few other projects for this series as well. As we go on, we'll catch up with him at some point, I'm sure. Yeah, this is a cracking little book, but let me read the blurb to you, and then you can sort of see what's going on in this one. Hachiman is in great danger. The Shogun's control is slipping. Bandits roam the land freely, and barbarian invaders have begun to raid across the borders. All this because the Dai-Katana, the Shogun's great sword, has been stolen. You are the Shogun's champion, a young samurai. Your mission is to recover this wondrous sword from Ikiru, the master of shadows, deep in the pit of demons. The best place for it, I think. Right, yeah, that's the blurb. Now, the plot for this adventure. On this one, the reader assumes the role of this young samurai, Kensei, whose mission is to recover this legendary Dai-Katana, which is the singing death, other name for this sword that's been stolen from this shogun. And the sword must be taken from the grasp of Ikiru, who's the master of shadows, who keeps it within his pit of demons. And along the way, you have to face all these foes, such as the treacherous Lord Tietzen and the Ronin Yoro Ginsei. So all these really nice kind of Eastern names and locations crop up in this book, which adds a really nice kind of touch to it, kind of unique. The main plot is as a samurai from Hachiman in Cool. So we're still in Titan, but we're in the continent of Cool. You're the Shogun's champion, and you're summoned by your lord to compete in this dangerous task. The kingdom of Hachiman is restless. There's many sort of feudal lords who are revolting against the shogun, and they're all at war with each other, causing kind of death and mayhem all over the country. And all of this is because of the evil master, Shadow's Ikiru, who's stolen this Dai-Katana, like I say, this singing death sword, and is trying to use it to and its secrets to rule over the land of the Hachiman, with all of his armies. And it's your task to prevent this by venturing forth towards Onikaru, the pit of demons, and slay Ikiru and recover this singing death sword, so that the shogun may reaffirm his kind of righteous rule. So there you go, that's the plot. It's quite straightforward, it's a lot of fun, and like I say, it's quite a unique sort of story, this one. Right, let's take a look at some of the game mechanics that can be found in this adventure, and we'll have a look at that adventure sheet as well. This book, it features an honour score, so a new attribute, and it could be kind of has an effect on the events in the adventure. So should the score reach 0, you're instructed to turn to reference 99, where you're given kind of like an end scenario. Pretty much commit suicide. I think it's seppuku, I think it's called in this one. So like the ritual suicide, so end of game basically. And this is also the first book to feature a list of special skills, which is always a good thing to choose from, and it can affect your gameplay quite considerably as you progress through the narrative. While it was preceded by Appointment with Fear, remember we reviewed Appointment with Fear a couple of weeks back, and you've got those choices of particular superpowers, and these are kind of replications of normal skills, so not superpowers as such. And with that one, with a choice of, like those particular superpowers, these ones are kind of like Jamie and Mark's sort of version of what Steve Jackson did. So quite a nice touch. And these 4 that are listed, they are Kyujitsu, which is like this archery skill you can take, which I think is you get like a range of arrows to go in with your bow, which is quite cool. You've got Aijitsu, which is this fast draw, really nice move you can perform at the beginning of each combat. You've got Karumjitsu, which is this heroic leaping that you can do, and No Tukenjitsu, which is this fighting with 2 swords. Now, those astute of you will be able to pick up on the fact that Japanese is my second language, and I'm very good at pronouncing these words. Now, there's no optimum choice. The book can be completed using any of these skills. They each allow lots of replayability, which is always a really good thing in these books. And you've got these different effects. Each one has a different effect on how certain moments in the book will play out. So they have quite a detrimental effect on what's going to happen. The archery option gives you, like I say, a bow and 4 different arrows, and then more can be collected as you progress. And each arrow has this kind of different behaviour to it, which is a nice touch and adds a sort of bit of realism. The 2-sword combat skill is really good, as it gives you kind of like this long sword, this katana, and a short sword, which is the wakishi, I think it's pronounced, giving you a sort of better chance in combat. There's the fast draw, which is handy for getting in those auto hits in combat. You can always, as you draw your sword, you basically inflict damage immediately, which is a really cool attribute. And then the final one was that heroic leaping, which plays a big part in certain plot instances. So they've all got their own little bit to add, and they're not just shoehorned in there to sort of make it interesting. They all play quite a significant part in your progress. And then we've got this stat for honour, and it forces you to sort of play out the role of the samurai. So it works really well with the background of this story. So if you act honourably, you'll get honour points, and if you act dishonourably, you'll lose them. And it will slowly decrease over time, and of course you can't let it go too low. There are a small number of moments where the honour score is checked, so you can't kind of like cheat, although they rarely sort of lead to instant death, which is a good thing. There's no sort of instant failure because of the honour, unless, of course, you let it drop to 0. So rather, they just sort of make you work harder to progress further. And whichever direction you initially choose in this book, because at the beginning you'll get an east or west, typical star, whichever way you choose will lead the first to a scenario where your ability to play a samurai role is tested. And this is really good, as it really brings you into the character, and it kind of gives you an indication of what to expect in this adventure. So yeah, some new mechanics, which is always welcome, and some really cool skills to suit this style of book. Right, this is the adventure sheet, and I quite like it because it's got that oriental theme to it, which is quite clever. But as usual, you've got your skills, stamina, and luck at the top there, and then you've got some notes, which is kind of weird. You'd expect the equipment list to be there. There aren't many items to pick up in this one, but yeah, a bit weird that they've given you notes instead of equipment. Then you've got your honor box, so you can record your increasing or decreasing amount of honor points, and then you've got your provisions as usual, and of course that special skill that you choose in the bottom there. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. I do like the look of this one. They've obviously made an effort to try and keep it, well, in keeping, shall we say, with the style of this book. But yeah, adventure sheet. Right, let's chat a little bit about the artwork for this book. This is Alan Langford's interior artwork, like I said. It sits really well with Smith and Thompson. They've obviously got a really good relationship, and Langford brings across that kind of Eastern atmosphere really well with all his detailed characters and Oriental environments. Langford also captures the descriptions given by Smith and Thompson. And some of the art is really amazing in its kind of combination of horror aspects and exotic locations. The Eastern kind of horror combines well with this kind of inspiring nature of certain creatures, especially those intended to be your allies towards the end of the book. And you make those later on in the adventure. And then, of course, subsequently, Peter Andrew Jones, who does the cover, is especially good. It kind of, it's got that attention-grabbing quality that we love from the original books, where you've got this eerie Shogun warrior, this undead samurai who you have to battle around about the halfway point of this book. Really tough encounter. And it kind of harks back to those covers that drew in the readers and that felt like they were stepping off of the page, you know. So I really like that. And as always, I've got this favourite picture here, this weird settlement you approach on one of the routes, and you bump into all these kind of odd zombie-like villagers, and you try to communicate with them, but they don't want to know. And then when you try and leave, their heads, they do like an exorcist, and their heads come off, and their heads chase you out of the village. And Langford did a good job at kind of bringing that description from Smith and Thompson to life with this creepy, weird, zombie-like picture. Weird. Okay, my likes and dislikes for this book. One of my dislikes was the amount of sudden death endings. There's not loads, but those there are a little bit unfair in that there's no real clue leading up to them. Like, you know, when you go back to Steve Jackson's books, sometimes he'll give you a hint, maybe a few references before the instant death, so you kind of think, oh, okay, I'm kind of getting the sense that there's going to be a nasty ending coming up. But you don't get that this one for some reason. And there's one area where there's like an 80% chance of dying. So you may end up having to start over a few times with this book. And since the plot is fairly linear, you kind of, some readers may lose interest. But it depends on your point of view, I suppose. Towards the end of this book, the battles are also quite tough, which is fine. Always love a challenge, and you will need a lot of honor points to succeed in general. So there's a couple of little things you kind of, as you play on and work through these books, or this book in particular, you need to sort of know how to improve. So it's always good to map these books to kind of make note of where the honor points can be gained and lost. So there's that, and like I say, I think I love the rich description throughout this book, and the writing for the environment, the sense of honor. It's really nice, and that kind of sense of duty as well, which is quite unique. And it kind of sits with you alongside this loving artwork, which portrays this world so well. The new game mechanics, they work really well. The honor system makes me wonder what the hero points system could have been like with Appointment with Fear. Remember, we reviewed that book, and it had that hero points system where it was just kind of for your own benefit, and it was something you could try and beat in future runs, but it didn't really have any impact on the story. Well, when I look at the honor system on this one, I think, that maybe something could have been done like that for Steve Jackson's Appointment with Fear, but so some really good new attributes and a good balance of combat and story. Fun facts for this book. The book was supposedly converted into a computer game. Remember how some of the previous few have had their own computer games made? Well, I don't think it ever took off because I couldn't find any evidence of it back in the day. But let me know in the comments if there is such a thing. But I think it was planned but never actually happened. And this is the third book set in the continent of Cool. So first one being Scorpion Swamp, and the next one being the Seas of Blood. And this book also features a sort of similar feel to that kind of medieval Japan, and the book sort of features numerous monsters from Japanese folklore. However, one of these, there's that type of undead that I showed you, that picture of those heads that can detach at night. They're called the Rokuru Kubai in the book, but they're actually called Nukubai in Japan. So they've obviously taken that concept, that weird mythology, and incorporated it into this book. The text copyright on the Wizard Book edition lists Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone as the authors, as opposed to obviously Mark and Jamie. So I was thinking, now that's for the original Puffin edition. They were down as Mark and Jamie. So that kind of suggests the rights were sold, which is probably why this title was published for Wizard. And it was a little bit like that Talisman of Death. I probably mentioned the same on that one, where Jackson and Livingstone took the credit for that one. But of course, this is Jamie and Mark's work. But yeah, I'm guessing that's what they did. They probably sold the rights. Right, let's have a look at the errors. There's only a couple I thought were worth mentioning on this one. It's a pretty solid book, but there was two that I thought were interesting. The rules for Nai to Kenjutsu give the player, samurai, the opportunity to sort of deal a second attack, like I said, but it doesn't really explain how it works exactly. And as combat is kind of simultaneous, it's simply rolling an attack strength comparison a second time would not really provide an advantage. Most likely the samurai cannot be harmed, maybe while performing their second attack, if their attack strength ends up being lower, much like sort of rules for multiple combat. But it's not really clear, so I guess it's down to interpretation. And the other one was on reference 105. It neglects to tell you that the penalty for losing your armour only persists until you can replace it with something of equal value. So by contrast, losing your armour in reference 313 does include the instruction. So yeah, just a bit of continuity really, nothing to get a twist about. Okay, let's do a summary and score for this book. My initial reaction to this book was, probably a lot of people's reactions as well, judging by the reviews I've read before this one. How did sort of feudal Japan find its way into the fighting fantasy world? And the answer is it doesn't. You could say that the region of Hachiman is an area separate from the rest of Cool and kind of developed in the same way that Japan did. Maybe Smith and Thompson had this issue with book 11, the Talisman of Death, but they set their adventure somewhere else. They set it on the world of Orb, so it's kind of like they managed to get around that one. And the plot is the real glue that binds this setting to the Titan world, that Titan concept. And it kind of fuses Japanese samurai concepts with this standard fighting fantasy plot really well. You've got that fighting fantasy thing where you have to retrieve the key item and then stop the main villain. And this one is obviously the sword, and the main villain is the Master of Shadows. And at face value, this is kind of straightforward, but the execution of the book is what makes for something much more involved. Interestingly, one route is easier than the other. So at the beginning you get east or west, as you usually do, but those two paths are almost like two different adventures. One develops your honour score, and the other takes a more sort of situation-based approach. And then with the two paths to victory, you get two separate adventures, like I say, and they only really merge at a choke point pretty much at the end of the book. So it's good replay value. So if you head west, you kind of deal with the rise of the rival Shogun, who has seized power, followed by this kind of trek through the Forest of Shadows, and then onto your target, with the entrance of the Pit of Demons. But if you go east, it takes you through this kind of loyal territory, which is flooded with all these undead people, and all these tough battles at a river, and then you either enter the Spider Fens or the Enchanted Gardens. So two really good, different routes through this book. The west route, like I say, is the easier of the two. The harder eastern path is longer overall and requires you to have sort of quite high stats overall. So without that, you're going to struggle. so once you've chosen the path, both routes kind of converge in the mountains, where you're faced with the hub. I'll put the picture up here. This is the hub, and it's full of these random encounters and item collecting. Yeah, and this hub is like a waiting room of a sort. And you've got all these different doors, and they all lead off into these different planes of existence. And this is where you can find your allies, providing you've picked up the right items and solved the right clues. And you can visit as many of these places as you wish in a bid to sort of get your allies to help you face these main 4 opponents that you have to fight at the end. And having some of the allies, you can then decide that it's time to go and face the opponents, or you can carry on searching for other ones through these doors. But you need the right allies to beat the right opponents before you reach your final goal, which is obviously the pit of demons. Yeah, the book is not particularly difficult. It's more about replay to find all the different plot threads and pass, rather than a book just to solve, a main puzzle or find a main solution. I rate this book quite highly, and everything works and holds really nicely together, sort of thematically and contextually as well. Overall, it's an interesting book, which presents a kind of strong environment and an intriguing set of special skills and some nice attributes. It makes use of them as well. It doesn't just put them in there. You do get to use your skills a lot throughout this book. The ending is quite satisfying as well, and different theme this book offers is very welcome it's a welcome change from the standard fantasy romp. But overall, I would give this a very high 7 out of 10 because it's a strong book from 2 very good authors. So 7 out of 10 I would give this one. Yeah, I think that's pretty much this review. So I hope you liked it. If you did, maybe give it a thumbs up, maybe share if you think someone else might like it, and leave a comment just to say what your thoughts are on this book. Maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't, but give me some thoughts on it, on your idea about Jamie and Mark's attempt at this one, because this is the last one they did. Unfortunately, I wish they would come back now that Scholastic have taken over. I kind of wish these 2 would come back and give us another book. But anyway, we'll do book 21 next, which is Ian Livingstone's return to Death Trap Dungeon with Trial of Champions. We'll do that one next. But until that review, take care, and I'll catch you then.